Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting basically now, I think. We're right on schedule, which is a change. Yes, people are saying, oh, I thought you weren't doing the podcast. Yes, I did say the podcast might not happen, but then the plan that I was supposed to have ended up falling through. So I became available to do the podcast. So that's why we're here.
Of course, we may not do next week's.
We may not do next week's. Yes, we will see. We will keep you updated on Twitter. That's a maybe for that next week. Well, I am ready to go when you are.
I'm just adjusting my white balance so I don't look like I have jaundice again. I drink, but not that much. All right. Minimize these windows. Goodbye. Bring up the show notes. All right, show notes are there. All right, I am now recording.
I am now recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central podcast, episode 238 for August 13th, 2021. Hey everyone, Gianna Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central podcast, where we talk all things Microsoft, tech, Surface, Xbox, and what other cool stuff has happened during the week. Speaking of this week, we'll be talking about Windows 11. I got another update for those of you in the Insider program. And we got a look at some of those new inbox apps that will be shipping as well. We'll share our excitement and our disappointment all in one segment. Let's talk about a little bit about chips, processors, Lenovo, and Surfaces. Basically, that chip shortage is going to go on for a while. It's going to affect things in the fall, but it'll affect companies differently. But some new numbers came out this week and some new data, which I find super fascinating, especially when we talk about laptops and PCs. We'd like to think that the pandemic thing was a blip. Turns out it may not be a blip at all. Instead, it may be the trend. Talk about Surface Pro 8 and Surface Book 4. If you're wondering, did you miss those announcements? No, we're going to speculate and talk about also from Zach's sourcing what he's actually hearing about these devices. And more importantly, how the Book 4 may not be the Book 4. Dun, dun, dun. We'll talk a little bit about an actual two devices that were announced this week. The Galaxy Z Fold 3 and Z Flip 3. We'll share our thoughts about those, the pricing models, and if we pre-ordered them and why not, and what that means for Duo V2, which is due to land, we believe, sometime, I don't know, September, October, around that time frame. HD trackpads. Actually, they're haptic trackpads. And I know this is probably a topic that's going to bore some people, but I find it super fascinating. There was a big announcement this week, and I'll put that into context and how this differs from the earlier announcement from Sensel that came a few months ago. That's in the X1 Titanium Yoga and what it all means. We'll do some review roundups. I did review the Panasonic Toughbook 55, aka one of my favorite laptops that allows me to pretend I'm a cosplaying soldier, and as well as the XPG Xena 14, which if you never heard of XPG, that's okay. We'll summarize what that is, why that's a really nice laptop, actually. And I guess we'll do the thing of the week, which is usually about what we watched, because let's face it, none of us are doing anything exciting these days. But Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Hanging in there. Long week. I'm technically going on vacation for next week, which, it's nice. I think it's the first one I've had since, I believe, January. Not a real vacation, right? Not going anywhere. Staycation. I may actually go down to New York just for a day or two.
Yeah.
But it's mostly going to be trying to get my life in order. So that said, I still have an embargo on Wednesday, a meeting on Tuesday, and possibly the podcast on Friday.
You need to stop.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's not really disconnecting when you got to have these commitments. But one of the meetings is with HP, and I really like HP. They're just a fun company to deal with, and they announce cool stuff. So always looking forward to talking to them. But I guess let's jump into the news with Windows 11. So as usual, and kudos to Microsoft, Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, bam, new build comes out. This one hit the beta and dev channel, so still have not separated, which is nice, which means if you're on the dev channel, you still have time to jump to beta before dev gets funky. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it will. Zach, walk us through what's new with this week, and let's talk a little bit about those inbox apps too.
Sure. So the build itself was build 22,000.132. Minor build this week. Only really fixes were introduced, and not many of them. Still a handful of known issues, quite a lot of them actually, which is to be expected. But the fixes primarily are just evolve the Windows shell and just making the OS more stable, which is, absolutely fine. They did mention that the chat feature for Microsoft Teams is now rolling out to those in the beta channel, and they're also rolling out one-to-one and group audio and video calling. So that's nice as well. So you can now actually finally test that out. Believe or not, that wasn't available in the previous, but that's finally there.
I just want to start quickly. It was funny with the Teams thing. We talked about that last week where it was in dev channel. They said it's not in beta channel. Yeah. They're looking to bring it to beta channel. I can confirm when you switch to beta channel, it literally disappeared. They took it away.
Take it away from you.
which was, I was like, really? So, but it's back now. So yeah. Thank you, Microsoft. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, the bigger thing this week was that Microsoft announced that they are starting to roll out a handful of the new sort of Windows 11 app updates. These aren't independent. These aren't dependent on the build. They are independent. They're running out to the dev channel first, but I figured we'd talk about them now. So the Snipping Tool, the other one is Calculator, and Mail and Calendar are the three sort of apps, 4 apps technically, being updated this week. We'll start with Snipping Tool, I guess. Snipping Tool, this new Snipping Tool essentially deletes the old classic Win32 app and replaces it with a UWP app, which is Snip and Sketch. Snip and Sketch has been around for ages. All they've simply done is added a little bit of UI that looks like the classic app, but it's based on UWP and it's an entirely UWP app. A lot of people were saying to me like, are they going to replace Snip and Sketch with the Win32 client? That's not what's happened. In fact, the opposite has happened. So this is now a completely UWP experience, which is good to see. It looks like a Windows 11 app. It looks pretty. It looks cool. But otherwise, functionality, it's exactly the same. You can create new snips. Win-Shift-S still works as expected. Once you take the snip, you get a notification. If you click on that, that will take you into the Snip and Sketch UI, which gives you the option to sort of ink over it and whatnot. Do whatever else you do in Snip and Sketch. Super cool. Calculator's been updated with rounded corners. That's basically what Calculator got, which is still nice. It looks better. And then Mail and Calendar. So people were sort of confused by this because they were expecting Microsoft to update Mail and Calendar with One Outlook, Project Monarch, which is what we've written about a little bit in the past. That's not happening now. If you go back and read my article originally, I even say in the bottom of it that because Monarch won't be ready in time for Windows 11, that's not supposed to be ready to ship until next year. Microsoft will be providing a minor UI update to the existing Mail and Calendar apps, and that's exactly what this is. This minor update will introduce rounded corners on some of the buttons within the apps, but that's basically it. No new features, no significant UI changes, just rounded corners, just to keep it in line with the rest of Windows 11 until Project Monarch is ready next year, in which case, with Windows 11 22H2, they will replace Mail and Calendar with One Outlook, assuming One Outlook is ready in time. So that's what's happening with the inbox apps. We're still waiting for the Clocks one. The Clock app hasn't been released yet, and of course, they've not shown us the Photos app or any of the other inbox apps that we're expecting to get updated as well.
Boring. I'm unfortunately on the beta stuff, so I don't really get the new apps. Although I guess I have rounded corners for our Mail and Calendar, so yay. Yeah. It's funny. I've been a defender of Mail and Calendar for a long time. For my needs, it's been basically what I want for my personal account. Yeah. It's simple, but I am having more and more problems with Mail and Calendar. Really? Actually, specifically Mail than I've ever had before. Like when it pulls in emails, sometimes it just takes forever to load, which I imagine has something to do. I'm talking where the email's formatted to pull assets from the website that the email is coming from. It just takes forever. And I don't see it on the mobile versions of the app. Things are sometimes I'll switch from the focus inbox to the main one, and there'll be like nothing there, and then it has to like refresh. It takes like 5 seconds, and all of a sudden my emails populate, even though it was just there the last time I opened up the thing. And I've had it crash a few times, and obviously there's just been no features. Now I get, as you pointed out, you reported in January about this One Outlook thing, and you said at least a year, it's going to be a year out for this. So we're still within that thing. So I get they don't really want to invest in, doing much with these apps, but I kind of can't wait for these new ones because I'm getting a little tired of the
Yeah.
current mail and the calendar
The
app.
current apps are in maintenance mode, I believe, so that makes sense considering One Outlook is on the way. I do believe they are planning to ship a public preview of One Outlook soon. It should be this summer, maybe September time, or maybe October. We're pushing it a little bit, but yeah, I do believe they are expecting to get a preview out this year for that. So if you're an insider and you want to, and you're ready to get rid of mail and calendar, as I'm sure many of you are, this should be ready for you to test pretty soon. And again, I don't think it will replace mail and calendar straight away. I think we're going to see that happen with the shipping build of whatever feature update comes next year for Windows 11. The mail and calendar apps, if you prefer them, they will still be available to download in the Microsoft Store, just like how Paint 3D is still available to download in the Microsoft Store. These won't be like outright gone. I think you'll still be able to use them if you want. But yeah, I think the plan is by default. The apps, the One Outlook will be the default mail experience on Windows 11 by the end of next year.
Interesting. Looking forward to that. There are a lot of questions being web-based.
Yeah.
In theory, this should be a lot better. I'm a big fan. I guess the question is, it's like, there's a lot of moving parts with the web-based app stuff. If you just, you can go to Outlook.com right now, pin it as a PWA, and use it that way. And that kind of would give you a little bit of a preview of what this stuff is going to be like. And a lot of people have actually really enjoyed the one Outlook.com version. That said, there are aspects to Windows 11, whether it's animations and styling and all this kind of stuff, that typically would go into like a native app, right? And not a web-based app. But we also know that they're working on different ways of packaging web apps and the frameworks around that to bring in the stuff with the Windows 11. So you don't necessarily, so the experience won't be jarring.
Yeah.
I think the experience is supposed to be when we do these One Outlook things is that it feels like a native app and it's just going to be fast and fluid and better than what we have now. But that's an interesting challenge. I'm really curious about what that's going to be like and how we respond to that as users.
I know that they are trying their best to make it feel as native as possible. It will be a native host app with a WebView 2 sort of back end, which brings in the web client, of course. But the client itself will also have hooks to the OS so that they support native things like notifications, push notifications, automatic handling of email addresses and stuff like that. There's one thing that people ask me about in regards to whether or not it will support multiple accounts in regards to other email services. You know how Mail right now supports Outlook, but it also supports Gmail or Exchange or whatever you want. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's a thing they can do with the web app. I would be surprised if they don't figure something out, because I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. A lot of people using Windows don't use Outlook. They use Gmail. And that would make this new client useless. So I'm sure they're figuring something out in regards to that. But yeah, I do think they are trying their best to make this feel as native as possible, or at the very least make it hook into all of the native parts of Windows that you would expect it to hook into as a mail client.
I should also point out, I guess we kind of can get a preview what this kind of feels like, because isn't the new Teams app basically written WebView 2?
It's the WebView 2, same tech basically, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're on the beta build, I suppose, when you launch Teams, it should be launching that version of Teams, which is definitely loads a lot faster than the previous version, which was Electron based, Electron is still not winning any fans over on the internet, whether it's Teams or I've seen even on, I forgot what client it was. It was something on a Mac that was also using Electron and Rust, I believe, and people were just lampooning it, saying how bad it was. So I guess if you want to try Teams, if you're on Windows 11 beta or dev, that'll give you kind of an experience of how this stuff. I like the new Teams. I mean, I should say I like the way it feels. Still not convinced that Teams is something I want to use, but that's a separate issue. But in terms of how it feels and operates, it's actually very fast and fluid. So I'm all for that.
Sweet.
Cool. Any else on Windows 11 we should know about?
Don't think so. I think
nothing on the Android apps yet.
No, still waiting for Android apps. I assume that will show up this month. It kind of has to at this point. The thing with that, though, a lot of people are like, how comes it's not in preview yet? It has to be by now. The reason it's not is because I think it works the exact same way WSL works, in that WSL is technically independent from the OS. I don't think it ships with Windows. So if you want it, you enable it and it comes through Windows Update as its own component. And I think the same thing will happen here with Windows Android apps on Windows. I assume if you want it, you will download a component and that will sort of bring it in, and then you can start testing it and stuff. So I don't know if it specifically depends on the build, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. Hopefully that shows up within the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, We might be looking at a delay.
Hopefully not. So many questions around that feature. The big one for me, will it be useful?
Right, yeah,
Instead
exactly.
of just a gimmick. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Let's shift our focus a little bit to processors, which will then, segue into the Surface discussion, the Surface Pro 8 and everything. So, we just posted a story this week regarding the chip shortage and how this is affecting literally everything, whether it's cars, PCs, IoT, servers, and more. So we have an article up on the front page of the site now kind of talking about this stuff. And, it's basically new data that's coming out. And unfortunately, the shortage seems to be getting a little bit worse, which is not wholly, completely unexpected here because we are entering back to school season. Kids need new computers. There's new office and IT equipment that's needed. And if you're working in a school, you start ordering stuff. So that's going to affect. We have parts of the country that have been reopening. And so and people are going back to work, although some of that's now being put on hold a little bit. But as that happens, those businesses are needing to buy new equipment. And you're seeing that as well as do upgrades. You also have just work from home stuff. People are buying new PCs. And so, the semiconductor shortage, it's now over 20 weeks is the delay. It's actually increased by 8 days. So this is for companies ordering things, basically. So there's a 20-week wait for it. This is the actual chips we're talking about. And different companies are handling this stuff differently. Some companies were smart and basically hoarded. Even Huawei hoarded Intel chips, apparently, before we banned them. And so I think that's why, we do have the review of the MacBook Pro coming up, the latest version. And the reason why they could still have 11th gen Intel chips is because they bought them months ago and kept them. So you have a lot of hoarding going on too, and that's still happening. But this isn't going to get better. I will say GPUs have kind of evened out a little bit, so that's good news there. We are starting to see NVIDIA prices come down as supply comes up a little bit. We'll see how long that lasts. But they're predicting, Intel came out, Gelsinger a little while ago saying he thinks this is going to go through 2023, as well as other chip manufacturers. And don't forget, we're talking SK Hynix, South Korea. They do a lot of memory stuff. You have Samsung, of course, also in South Korea. And then you have TSMC, the world's largest fab and manufacturer chips. So they actually make chips for Apple as well as AMD and other companies. They're saying at least 2022, the first half, we're going to continue seeing these supply issues. I should also point out, now this is what's good here, is the demand for PCs is there, it's strong, it's been growing, and moreover, it's predicted to last. And this, to me, is the real news here. So I think when this pandemic happened and we saw a lot of people buying laptops and switching from work to home, this idea that there was a boost in PCs and new equipment people were buying, displays and keyboards, all that was going to happen. But it always felt like it was going to be a blip, right? It's like, oh, when things return to normal, people will have their PCs and it'll go back down then. That's not happening. And so demand is still very high. And I think it was interesting. Lenovo came out this week with its quarterly numbers. And as I predicted a few weeks ago, I said where Microsoft had problem shipping Surface and saw a decline, I said Lenovo predicted they were going to do very well. And they did. They broke their records again. And, they saw for the first time sales for desktop PCs go back up since 2019. And the reason why Lenovo can do this better than Microsoft is because Lenovo shipped 89 million computers in one quarter.
Wow.
They're the number one shipper in the world. And so when they buy chips from Intel or AMD or NVIDIA, they buy in mass quantity and they get first in line because that's a huge contract that those companies, whereas Microsoft is down on that list. But the real interesting news is not that, right? So that fits in with their guidance that they gave last quarter. Had they not met that guidance, that would have been kind of big news. So all Lenovo did was do what they said they were going to do. But it goes to show you that the PC market is still just doing very, very well. But let me bring up let's see if I can bring up the notes here for this. And okay, sorry, almost there. I just want to read this. This was actually in China Daily. and I'm quoting what they said, and this is based off of Lenovo's results. Lenovo said the pandemic has changed how people live and work, with PCs returning to the center of digital lives. That's a really interesting statement. The PC refreshment cycle has shortened, so people are buying laptops more often. It used to be 5 years. That was, you would buy a PC, you held on to for 5 years. Apparently that's dropping. The penetration rate has increased. That just means more people are buying these. Whereas a family would have maybe one computer that they would kind of share. Now everybody's getting a computer, so that's what that translates to. And total PC demand until 2025 will at least remain at current levels, with commercial demand rebounding quickly. That's crazy. And Zach brought up, how do they know it's going to go through 2025? It's a good question. I will say that Lenovo, being the #1 shipper of PCs worldwide, probably has a good sense of where this is all going and feels like they could make that kind of statement. Now, we'll have to wait and see what that happens. But this doesn't appear to be a blip. What they're saying is this is a real transformation in just how the world is working now. And that where PCs were kind of dwindling, and yeah, you'd still need it once in a while, but it was the smartphone. PCs are coming back front and center. And what's interesting is you have that happening. And then you also have Microsoft here with Windows 11, we were just discussing. And one of the drives for doing Windows 11 in the first place was Microsoft saw this. They saw this sort of interest coming back. Instead of doing 10X, they're like, let's not miss this current PC thing, which is also growing. And you have those two things coming together, which is super interesting. And I know people are going to, harp on, you need a new computer to run Windows 11 and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that really matters. I know that bothers some people and the people listening to this podcast, but I can tell you normal people don't care. They're going to buy a new PC when they need a new PC, flat out. Only reason. They're not going to be like, wah, I can't get Windows 11, and be upset. I don't think they're going to care at all. They probably won't even know that there's Windows 11 that they need to get. But they're going to need a new PC when they need a new PC. That means either new form factors, new connectivity options. We're seeing 4G, 5G obviously become more and more important. And, this goes into, of course, Surface now, right? Microsoft last quarter said we expect to have problems this coming quarter. And this is where it gets into with the launch in October, where, traditionally they announce new devices and ship new devices. We expect that to happen, but we have also heard, at least Zach has heard, that some of that's been pared back. And it makes sense because Microsoft is down low on that list in terms of ordering computers and chips. So they're going to be behind Lenovo, HP, Dell, probably even Razer and everybody else in terms of getting their processor demands met. That said, we do expect some Surfaces to launch, specifically Surface Pro 8 and a new Surface Book 4, but not Book 4. Zach, why don't you help explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so the Surface Book 4, as we've sort of been referring to it as, and I think I mentioned this last week as well, I don't actually think it will be called the Book 4. I don't think this is a successor to the Book line, but rather a new form factor. And there was a patent that came out, which we also talked about, which sort of showed this sort of pull forward technique. I'm more and more confident that that's the actual laptop that's going to ship this fall, not a new Surface Book, because a few people who I've been speaking to about this device, I don't know much, but I've heard bits and pieces here and there. A lot of them sort of off the cuff have referred to it as like Surface Laptop Studio or Surface Studio Mini, stuff like that, like referring to the studio aspect. And if you think about the studio's design is one that with a display that can pull forward. Adding two and two together sort of suggests that this device will sort of feature that pull forward technique. I was also told months ago that this new laptop wouldn't have a detachable design. So that left two options. It's either a pull forward or a 360-degree hinge. And I think they're going to go for the pull forward technique because it's more unique, it's more Surface. They can over-engineer it and make it so it stays at any angle and stuff. And it's typical Microsoft. But regarding this device, which I'll refer to as Surface, Laptop Pro or Studio, whatever you want to call it, we'll also have things like a larger trackpad, as expected. It's also going to have around a 14-inch screen size, which is new for Surface. They've only been 30.5 or 15. I don't think they've ever done a 14-inch, so this will be new. We'll have a high refresh or a dynamic refresh rate display, which is matching what Windows 11 supports. I believe the Surface Pro 8 will also have that as well. And it will also have RTX graphics. Don't know which ones. I just know that it has RTX graphics, or it should do anyway. And I don't know anything about the chips. I know that's sort of the big concern for lots of people. Will this have 4-core chips, or will this have more powerful 6 or 8-core chips? The answer is I don't know, but I assume it will have more powerful 6 and 8-core chips because of its design. The chip and the GPU will both be in the base, which means there's more thermal room. And therefore they can actually sufficiently cool a more powerful chip. The reason why the Surface Book doesn't have a 6 or 8-core chip inside of it is because the chip is in the display and there's just no room to thermally cool something more powerful than a 4-core processor. So we will see what the Surface Book 4, the Surface Laptop Studio or Pro ends up being, but I do think this will be a new form factor line, not a replacement for the Surface Book. I still think the Surface Book will continue to be sold, and perhaps maybe even it will get a Surface Book 4 of its own at some point in the future. Not this fall though.
Got it. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting with the core count, and as you mentioned, this does allow them to put in a real processors into that. It's gonna be the real big difference. And we already answered this question on the Ask Windows Central episode. That'll come out next week. But, to rehash, I'd be shocked if they went with just a 360 hinge design. That feels very not them, because we've seen
them do 360-degree hinges. And, they work and they're great. But I think for a big laptop, a power user laptop, I'm not sure the 360-degree format works. Because the idea of a studio, a pull-forward display, it's so much more versatile in that it can turn into like a draft board, just like the studio can. There's more unique capabilities for creators. You can bring it forward. Microsoft can even do like geeky things like saying, it puts you more in your flow. The screen is closer to you as you work. Stuff like that, because it's different and it's unique. And I think it's certainly very Surface. The pattern itself, I don't know if that's the exact design they will go for. They pattern loads of different ways to do a certain thing. But I do think that pull-forward display is definitely a possibility on this new laptop.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense with what we saw with Surface Studio, all the investment they put into that hinge technology. It's like, well, why not take that hinge technology, make it smaller, and put it into a laptop? And we've seen similar stuff before. I mentioned the Acer Aspire R7 goes back to 2013, I want to say. You can look it up again, Acer Aspire R7. It had hinges and a pull forward display. And Acer still does that, right? So what if Microsoft applied what it knows from Surface Studio? It would really create a new type of form factor to a next level. I mean, Acer's done it, but it has limitations. It's not nearly sophisticated. This would be a floating display where it would act like a normal laptop, 14-inch laptop, which, by the way, 14-inch is the perfect size for a laptop. It will just be a normal one, but then you can pull it forward, but then it kind of floats. It's not snap forward, snap back. It's going to be in between all those angles. And so in that sense, it kind of feels like the Apple iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard, except this will actually work in your lap. Like the problem with that design, the way they have it is it's very unstable in your lap, but this would have a full solid base. I imagine it'd be like a square block almost of just metal. And then they can have, imagine air intake vents on the side and blow out through the back so you don't get hot air. Again, traditionally Surface design, people don't appreciate this with the book and the laptop. They don't put vents on the bottom of the device. Like that's I don't think it gets enough attention, because having vents on the bottom of the device causes issues, right? If you put it onto your lap, if you can block the vents, it's not that comfortable maybe for some people. And so when you have them on the side, so I can imagine them doing something similar to that. But yeah, now they could put in a real processor, RTX graphics, and we expect a 3000 series. It'd be very weird for them to put in a 2000 series, because I don't even think NVIDIA really wants to produce those anymore. And if you can do the 2000 in a laptop, there's no reason why you can't do the 3000. The thermal envelopes for those are very similar. So if you already can do one, you should be able to do the other. But that'd be a very powerful laptop with a very exciting form factor. I think that would be kind of the perfect form factor. I mentioned with the Elite Folio from HP how much I really enjoy it, but we haven't really seen it too much on a big 14-inch laptop.
Yeah.
The only way it could be more perfect, which I know they won't do, but I'm just going to throw it out there, if they added 4G or 5G. If it was actually a truly connected device. I know begging Microsoft here, but we'll see.
Well, it is interesting because obviously this device will be launching around the same time as Windows 11. It will almost certainly ship with Windows 11, and it will be one of those Windows 11 hero devices. With every new version of Windows, as of my memory at least, there's always been an event where they announce, Windows X is now available. Here's a bunch of new hardware that has it pre-installed. And, you'll see some from Dell and HP and Lenovo. And, Microsoft will also have this as well. They didn't do this with Windows 10. Windows 10 launched in July, and they didn't ship new hardware till October. But that October event was the 2015 event. That's when they, many people say that was one of their best events, and I agree. That was when the Pro 4 was announced, the Surface Book, which was a new form factor for Windows 10, and a whole bunch of other devices. I think we're going to see a similar thing. We'll see the Pro 8, which will be, sort of look more like the Pro X. Then we'll have this new Surface Laptop Studio, whatever they call it, which will be the new form factor for Windows 11. And then we may also see a Surface Go 3. But I'm not expecting an actual Surface Studio desktop replacement yet, unfortunately. And of course the Surface Duo 2, but that's not really Windows 11 related.
Yep. Surface Pro 8, and we should also, I don't know if you did mention about this with the high refresh displays.
Yes, dynamic refresh rate. Yeah, because Windows 11 supports a feature called dynamic refresh rate, and it would be weird for Microsoft's first Windows 11 PCs not to support that. That would be like, the Pro 4 and the first Surface Book not supporting Windows Hello. They're going to adopt this and sort of take advantage of it. The dynamic refresh rate allows the display to go from up to 120 hertz, or maybe even higher than that. We don't know.
I think it's higher, probably.
Down to 60 when it's not actually like moving anything on the display to save battery life. I assume these displays will be 120 hertz and sort of go back and forth, but they could also be 90. So who knows?
Yeah, a lot of the reason we don't see this a lot is because just battery life. Currently, if you do a 90, 120, or even a 300 hertz laptop display, which they exist too, is it kills your battery. And that's okay for gaming laptops where you're willing to sacrifice that for the expectation of high rate gaming. But when it comes to a laptop, an ultrabook productivity type device, that's a tough trade-off when the whole industry has been trying to maximize battery life. But we've seen Apple do this with their ProMotion displays and the iPad Pro and stuff like that. And they've done the same type of technology where it hits 120 hertz once in motion, but then drops back down to save battery life. It would be weird for Microsoft to come out with Surface Pro 8 and this new Surface Laptop Studio or whatever they're going to call it and not support that. But we'll see what actually, if it's 90, 120 hertz. I think it'll be a big improvement regardless. There's also the haptic pen, which we're expecting. So it's going to basically feel like when you're writing on the screen, instead of just a thing on glass, it's going to be able to vibrate and make it feel like it's you're writing a pencil on paper. And that's a really weird thing, but haptics can do that. And we'll talk a little bit about this when we get to the trackpad discussion. But it can really trick your brain into doing this. And that feeling, that's going to be so crucial because the idea of like making these pens and pencils more useful is the idea that they feel very much like using organic device, pen and paper, and they can kind of do that stuff now. So you got the new pen, new Windows Hello, Surface Pro 8. We expect a larger display, possibly pushing 13-inch, between 12.7 and 13. I could see where they thin out the bezels. You'll still have the bezels; they'll still be enough to hold and grip, but they have to thin those down a bit, and they can do that, make the display larger. Win-win. It would be curious if they drop the Type A port. I think they might. I actually do think they might. If you look at the, I always forget, Dell has the worst numbering systems. Let's see if I can. There's a Dell. They offered me for this review, but I'm too busy. I will review it, but not for a little while, unfortunately, because I just have too much stuff. The Dell Latitude 7320. Basically, if you want a Surface Pro right now with 11th gen, kind of next gen stuff, this is it. It actually looks what I think the Pro 8 would actually look like. It even has their own slim pen and the keyboard deck, just like we're expecting with the Pro 8 and what the Pro X has. But it has thin bezels, and they ditched Type A. It's just Type C, Thunderbolt 4, because Dell knows what's up. And so you can get it with connected with 4G and 5G maybe too, I think. But it's all good stuff. So the Surface Pro is going to be, I think, a very. These are two cool devices. They're going to be very different users. One's going to be an ultra portable. One's going to be a mobile workstation, effectively. But this could be pretty cool stuff to actually see for the fall. And then, as you mentioned, Duo V2.
Yeah. A couple of people asking about the Surface Pro X. Here's where the sort of chip shortage comes in, because we're not sure in regards to even the stuff we've mentioned, the Pro A, this book for whatever it's called. We don't know 100% if they will be able to ship that this fall because of the chip shortage. Microsoft is right now discussing and trying to order those things in, and whether or not they can get enough to actually ship a product remains to be seen. I don't think they're, or maybe they are by now, but as of last week or the week before last, they weren't certain what was going to be shipping, and I'm not certain because of that. But I think it's likely that we will definitely see a Pro 8 and this new laptop thing and the Duo 2. I think those are almost 100% locked in. Go 3, Pro X, Laptop Go, and are unknowns. And in the studio, I've been told it's definitely not happening this year. So take that as you will. Like I said, all of this is still up in the air. Things can move around and change at the last minute. But I think we're probably getting to a point now where they're finally locking in what will and won't ship. But that will remain a mystery to us until October.
Yep. All good stuff. Very exciting. But yeah, well, to see this chip shortage, like I said, they're on the bottom rung there for that list. Yeah. I could also see the, Laptop Go and the Go devices coming in the spring because they may be just processor refreshes. Exactly. Honestly, Laptop Go, pretty perfect device. I mean, add a backlit keyboard.
Yeah.
and refresh the processor. It's kind of solid
for me, all that product needs is a higher res display and backlit keyboard. Right. That's all it needs, and it will be perfect for me. Yeah,
I wouldn't say no to a display that goes to a little bit of higher resolution, no doubt about that. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, Galaxy Fold 3 and Flip 3. Samsung had its event this week. Everything expected because everything Samsung leaks months in advance.
Yeah.
I was actually pre-briefed on this stuff as well, so I knew what was coming. And also, I should mention they have the new Galaxy Watch coming out, which looks great. If you're into that, it's bigger display and all this kind of stuff. But the Fold 3 and Flip 3 are really interesting. Fold 3 does it's a little bit thinner. It's a little bit lighter. The bigger news is it dropped down by a couple $100. Instead of $2,000, now it's $1,800. That's still hella expensive, obviously. So expensive. They are allowing you through the pre-orders for the first time to do multiple trade-ins, which is actually something Apple does. Only in the US. Apple allows you to do this, which is fun. I used to go to the Apple store with like a bag full of goodies. Half of it was theirs, and just be like, "Give me the new phone." So they want $100 for like a Surface Pro 6, I think, which is kind of it's like really $100. It's true though. Surfaces don't nearly have as good resale value as like a Mac does. Yeah. But I was able to bring down the price even with the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra 5G. I brought the price down to $600, which sounds good.
Yeah.
But I was still like, no, I don't. And what it comes down to is Jez Corden, our games guy, he ordered it. But it makes sense. One thing we know about Jez is he lives on his phone.
Yeah.
Like literally he's all the time on it. So for him, I think it makes sense because he's going to. I don't use my phones nearly that much. I use them on the couch and obviously when I'm out. But even then, it's more about your basics in case I need to make a phone call, obviously, as a key to my car, because that's a thing. And mostly messaging and just quickly looking up something, right? That's all I use them really for. But I don't. If I'm going to do a deep dive, watch videos, do research, read an article, I'm going to bust out one of the 35 laptops in my house that I have, right? Which I should be doing anyway because that's what I review. So I went for the Z Flip 3, which is also an interesting device because they dropped the price down to now starting at $999, which is that magical $1,000 price point. It was like, what, $1,350, I think it was the price tag. So that's a pretty substantial drop. Meanwhile, they increased the processor is the Snapdragon 888. It now has a 120 hertz refresh display, which is nice. It has stereo speakers instead of single. It's now IPX8 rated. So that just means if you're out in the rain, it's fine. If you briefly submerge it in water, it can last like 30 minutes or something like that. But that's still impressive that's a first, right? Same with the Fold 3 has this. First time we've seen some water rating, something I don't think Duo V2 will have, to be honest. But you have that, you have new colors, they improved the outer display. I actually think the Flip 3 is the more interesting of the two. Although I should say the Fold 3 is doing something very big as well. They're introducing the S Pen, finally. The Fold to me never made a lot of sense because you couldn't use a pen on it. It just was begging to be used with the pen. And I get it, right? It was hard to do. And even this one has some compromises. If you press hard, the pen tip goes away basically, so you don't damage the display. But we know this could be done. Lenovo did it with the X1 Fold, but that makes that device certainly more interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the Flip 3 is going to be their consumer breakout device because this is the one that has more mass appeal, definitely more affordable. I think that, going to gender, right? I think a lot of women look at this and like, oh, it can actually fit in my pocket because that's the beauty of that device. It's you and I both have the Flip. It's a full phone. It's a full candy bar phone that flips down half its size. It's genius. And it's fun to use. I don't think people understand that stuff. What are your thoughts about what was announced? I know you didn't. You came close to ordering the Flip 3, but you didn't.
I did not know. The Flip 3 looks great, and as you mentioned, I was a huge fan of the first Flip. I had one of those. I had a first Galaxy Fold as well. I loved both of those devices. But I have not ordered any of the new ones, only because I'm waiting for the Duo 2. Now, that said, I do find the Fold 3 specifically, I do find quite interesting because I think this is the first Fold that really sort of competes with the Duo, which, not to say that the Duo was a better device to begin with, but there were always different devices, and they are still different devices in regards to form factor, don't get me wrong, but Samsung is beginning to utilize that bigger display properly now. This is the first Fold to actually have Samsung's apps adopt the larger screen for a more tablet optimized layout. And that was one of my biggest complaints with the Fold 1 and the Fold 2, was that the apps just look like phone apps blown up. It's useless. It doesn't really make sense. Samsung's also improving the software so that it's easier to multitask across two apps now. In fact, Microsoft was a demo on stage at their event where they were like, here's the Microsoft apps. You can have two Office apps open side by side and drag stuff between them, which was the exact same demo Microsoft did for the Duo when the Duo was announced. We're getting, and now the Fold 3 has pen support, which was a selling point for the Duo, which was something it had over the Fold. Not anymore. We are getting to a point now where the Fold technology, the foldable display, is becoming capable of doing the things that the Duo was supposed to excel at because it has two glass displays. The Fold 3 and I think the Flip 3 are IPX8 rated, which means they can be sort of dropped into water and survive now. The displays have been proven to be sort of sturdy, that they can take pen support now, that they're not as fragile as we first assumed they would be. I don't think the Duo 2 has any IP rating. We are...
Right.
The Fold is now eating into the Duo sort of areas where it was supposed to excel. And I think that's a big problem for Duo fans or Duo customers and Microsoft itself. Because now, what is the selling point of the Duo? What differentiates it from the Fold? Why wouldn't you just splash and get a much more technically advanced foldable display device rather than one with two screens? And really, I'm now beginning to struggle to answer that question. Originally, it was the pen, the durability, the fact that you can use, you can fold it 360 degrees. Not really a problem anymore. The Fold 2 and the Fold 3 have a full-size display on the outside. There's no need to fold it 360 degrees. It's becoming harder to sort of argue that case with the Duo now, I think. But this all comes down to software. I still think the Duo could do the multitasking better. Samsung's getting there now, but they're still not there. Microsoft is, I think, ahead, although there's still bugs on the Duo, of course. In regards to the automatic multitasking, the defined real estate, as Panos Panay referred to it, still is superior on the Duo. And that will likely always be the case for as long as you have dual displays, unless Samsung added a mode which automatically opened an app on one half of the single display, which they could do, and that would be easy for them to do if they wanted to. The question is, do people want that? Do people want to be able to have the automatic multitasking that the Duo provides, or are they happy with opening one app and then manually snapping it to the side, almost like on Windows? I think we're getting to a point where people are making that decision, and Microsoft is figuring out, or Samsung's figuring out, what people want and what people don't want.
To be fair, though, let's be clear here. What's the starting price on the Galaxy Fold 3? Was it 1,800?
Yes, that's right.
1799?
Yep.
Is it 1799? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
1799, whereas Surface Duo V2 we're expecting to be 1,400.
Yes, I assume the same
The,
price as the first Duo.
yeah, so 1390 was 1399, right?
Yes.
Although there was a cheaper version, right? Was there? Oh no,
No, that was the entry level
that
1399.
was the starting price.
Yeah.
I mean, not for nothing, but like $400 difference is still pretty massive in
Sure.
terms
Yeah,
of
for sure.
cost.
Yeah.
Like that's not even Steven. Now, you do make the good point. And this is where I think Microsoft will continue to struggle, which is Samsung is massive. They're sinking millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars into R&D into these devices because we've joked about this before. The Android market is basically the Samsung market, right? It's increasingly difficult sometimes to recommend Android phones outside of Samsung, at least if we want the latest and greatest stuff. That said, I still got to review that TCL phone. Realme also has, that $500 $600 range is actually getting very nice too, but it is dominated by Samsung, and they can just do this stuff faster and kind of better. Whereas Microsoft, it's like, are they really ready to play with the big boys? The big boys
Right.
being that even HTC couldn't sweat it, LG couldn't sweat it, OnePlus can't sweat it now, right? They're having a lot of issues. It's a tough market to crack. I still think, and one reason I didn't spend the money for the Fold 3, I still feel the design and form factor of Duo is just better
Yeah,
for my
yes,
needs,
I
at
agree.
least. I get for people who want the full tablet experience and the big screen, but for me, for something like that, I would then switch to one of my laptops or the Pro X. But I like the idea of the dual screen and that separator. And I know you can simulate that with software, but it's not the same. It really isn't.
No, you're right. Yeah.
I'd also and you mentioned the outer display on the Fold, which is true, and you can use it one-handed, but that device, when it folds, is a thick brick.
Yep.
It's slightly lighter now, but it's still a brick in your pocket that I think a lot of people would struggle to use. But that screen is also very tall and very narrow. And I think it's more narrow now on this version than the previous one, where it got a little bit wider again. And people have complained that, yeah, you can view and do stuff on it, but as soon as you go to type, it becomes an issue. It's too cramped. And the screen resolutions and the aspect ratios they chose with this device is a little bit weird to do. So I think there's definitely trade-offs there. I think it's good either way. I think this is definitely going to propel a little bit more mainstream. I think Flip, as I said,
Yeah.
will be the mainstream, the one that gets a lot of attention, the one that normies and regular people
The
will
Fold's
actually.
too expensive still. That's the problem, I think,
Yeah.
for most people.
But that also then kind of gets into the question of pricing. So, we've just mentioned Duo. We expect to be at least $400 cheaper, which I still think is pretty massive. But that does leave room for Microsoft to, what we know of the hardware V2, 5G, 888, 3 cameras on the back, all this kind of stuff. It does allow them room to trim some of that off.
Yep.
And drop the price. And, what do you think of the odds of that happening? Because if Microsoft can bring Duo a lighter version, same design, same displays, basically, maybe even drop the displays down from what we're expecting to be a higher refresh rate to normal, but hit that $999 mark.
Right.
Does that change things?
I think this is very possible. I think now that, like we mentioned, the Fold is sort of eating into the Duo sort of territory in regards to productivity and whatnot, and the Flip is now at $999. The Duo is going to have a hard time trying to convince people at $14.99, whatever they decide to sell the Duo 2 at. I think they need to figure out a way to make this cheaper. The dual screen form factor should be the cheaper foldable alternative, and Microsoft needs to almost embrace that, almost, because I don't think it will survive at the price it's at. Even with the best specs and the most features you can throw at it, I still think it makes more sense to buy a Fold. Once you cross the $1,400 threshold, I think you're willing to sort of splash out for the best you can buy at that point. And I don't know if the Duo with its dual screens is that. However, if the Duo was $999 or $899, that's a no-brainer. Of course you're buying the Duo. Why wouldn't you buy the Duo? It's almost $1,000 more for a Fold. No way. So I do think Microsoft will explore the idea of expanding the Duo line or releasing a cheaper Duo. It won't be with the Duo 2. The Duo 2 is certainly a flagship device, and that will likely be priced around the same as the Duo 1 was. But maybe in 2022 we will see Microsoft make a cheaper Duo with less cameras or lower refresh rate displays and stuff like that.
And quite frankly, I think a lot of people in this audience and would be fine with that. Like, it's because we talked about this last time. It's like, why did they go from like one really bad camera to 4 basically on version 2? It's like, that's like, we didn't want that much camera, right? But it does allow them to, if they can do that and still sell it for $1,400, all of a sudden, that with the NFC, which we're expecting on board, and 5G, and all of a sudden that price becomes a little bit more justifiable. It's still expensive for a lot of people, but it becomes, like I said, justifiable. It's like, well, you're getting at least, really good cameras on the back. We are expecting the cameras to be pretty good. Zach will have more on that later, down the road. But these cameras, I think, are going to be pretty impressive. They're not going to beat Samsung. They're not going to beat the Pixel. They're not going to beat Apple. Don't get me wrong. I think they're going to be pretty good. But if they can chop off all those cameras and just have one on the back, one good primary camera, and then the front-facing camera, I think a lot of people would be like, that's actually all I want, because they want that form factor. And if that can mean like a thinner, cheaper device too, and that could be, I think, a really big deal. So I'd be really curious to see if they do that.
Because I think you're totally right when you mentioned that the Fold's form factor is weird, and the Duo's is weird as well. But I think the Duo's is much nicer, and I think most people will agree the Duo looks like a nicer device, almost to its. Introduces issues. The reason why the Duo 1 doesn't have any cameras on it is because of the form factor. The pretty form factor was the result of them cutting off a bunch of features, including NFC, the cameras.
Sorry, I'm just laughing. Did you take the bumper off again?
I did. I hate that bumper so much. It's terrible. Okay. Anyway.
So I didn't mean to interrupt your thought there.
Yeah, I do agree that the Duo's form factor is nicer. And I actually prefer the wider aspect ratio of the two screens. I like that. Even though it makes it harder to use one-handed, for typing like that, it's beautiful. It's perfect. It's the best phone I've ever typed on for that. But yeah, I think also the thinness plays a big part. The Duo is super thin for a foldable. It's basically the same thickness as a normal flagship smartphone, and it gets even thinner when you open it. Like if you've never held a Duo, holding a Duo for the first time is an incredible experience because of how thin it is. It almost doesn't feel like it should work. It feels like a sort of prototype or like a non-working dummy. But it does. It totally works. And them adding a camera on the Duo 2, of course, will sort of interrupt that sleek design with it will look more like this now when it's in single screen mode, but not when it's in dual screen mode. It will still be still be the thinnest foldable out there for that task specifically, and it will still feel thin in your pocket because obviously it's still mostly that. Only the bump is the added thickness there, really. So yeah, the form factor on the Duo, I still think it makes more sense. But the appeal of the Fold is strong, and I think most normal people look at the Duo and they look at the Fold. Regardless of how ugly or pretty either looks, they will choose the Fold because of the technological advancements that the foldable screen provides over having dual screens.
And that Samsung, the brand name, a lot. Samsung, they're not Apple, but you do get pretty good surface with them. When you buy these now, you get a year of their special care, which I didn't even follow what that means. I had to send my Z Flip in. My Z Flip stopped working. I've talked about that on the podcast. It was actually a memory chip failure. It had nothing to do with the display. I had to send it in to them, but their service was pretty good. Sent it out. I think it was like 10 days maybe. I got it back. It's the exact same phone. They apparently were able to crack it open and replace the board, and everything was fine. But you get that, right? With Samsung, you get some pretty good service.
Oh, yeah.
Not that Microsoft's been pretty good too, but it's just not at that level, right? So, but yeah, when it comes to the form factor, I'm still on board with Duo. That's why I didn't pull the trigger with Fold 3. I also find Flip 3 just a little bit more fun and interesting, so I did buy that. I got that for $99 once I did some trade-ins. So
nice.
I'm trading in my current Z Flip and the Note 20, and I forgot what else. I'm also going to get their earbuds because I figured I'd try those as well. But I ordered it in the green color, so I'll probably do a mini review or something like that for Windows Central if you guys are interested. Let me know.
Did you get the watch? The Galaxy Watch?
I did not get the watch because I'm kind of still done with smartwatches at this point. I did trade in my Galaxy, my Sport 2 watch. I am trading that in because I do own the Samsung watch, which I think is a great watch.
Yeah, I like the Active Watch too. I was looking at this new Active Watch because obviously the new watch is an Active. The new Galaxy Watch 4 is essentially a continuation of the Active series. It now runs Android instead of Tizen, which I'm not too keen on. I know the new Wear OS is supposed to be way better than the old Android Wear, but I'm still not 100% convinced by that. So I'll wait for reviews. But I loved the Active Watch 2. I bought two of them in fact, over the course of its lifetime.
You scratched one too, right?
I did scratch one, yeah. Well, actually, I think I scratched it like on the first day I got it as well.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I forgot to look into that. I know so much more now about glass on watches because I think if that's a mineral glass, you can get a polish and just basically buff it out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Or if it's a hard Lex, you can't. And then the difference is with when you go to an Apple Watch, and I think Samsung probably did this too. They moved to a sapphire glass, which is basically technically you can crack it, but it's very hard to scratch it, which is what you see on high-end watches. So, but yeah, I'm still the good news with my watch obsession. I found the one watch so far. I've been wearing the same mechanical watch now for 3 weeks. Today, 3 weeks.
Nice.
It's the Seiko Marine Master 300, which if you're a watch nerd, you know what that means. But I'm obsessed with this watch. So I don't think if Microsoft does a wearable, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
But I'm team heavy steel watch on my hand. I like to think it feels like a weighted blanket, how that calms people.
Yeah.
Wearing a heavy watch gives me that feeling. But I'll be watching the reviews. Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile, will definitely be doing reviews of all this stuff, as our brethren at Android Central, who already reviewed their new earbuds and stuff like that. Maybe I'll try the new earbuds on the podcast, and you can all stop telling me I look like I have 19 gauge piercings or whatever for my ears. I don't think those buds look much better. It's like I'm gonna have a green bean stuck in my ear. Is that cool? Like that's what the cool kids are wearing? All right. We'll see though. Anyways, that's our coverage of the Galaxy stuff. So Jez is getting the Fold 3. And he's going to do some content on Windows Central. And he's going to obviously look into getting the Duo V2. So we'll be doing some kind of comparisons and some content around that stuff. And if you guys want to know more about the Flip 3, I guess we'll do that. But everybody else will be covering that pretty well. All right, let's move on to trackpads.
This is all you, Dan.
I know. This is important because it's going to be a new modality for laptops. I don't think I'm telling you, when this stuff starts to hit, and there's many aspects to this, but in 2022, it's going to affect how we use laptops. And I think this is an important thing. So what happened this week was two companies, Boreas and Cirque, announced a partnership. And if you've never heard of these companies, that's fine. Boreas is a small company based, actually kind of Vermont. The founder came out of Harvard and here in Boston. He was doing his PhD, discovered something to do with piezo transistors, dropped out, started his own company, and they've been working, and I'll explain the whole piezo thing in a second. The other company is Cirque. Cirque is actually owned by Alps. Alps is a Japanese company. Alps is one of the first companies to do trackpads in laptops, basically, and they still supply all the major trackpads to Lenovo, HP, Dell, and I believe they work with Microsoft as well. So they supply this stuff. They tell me that customers, that is companies probably like HP or Dell, I don't know which ones, came to them and were like, we want haptic trackpads. What can you offer us? And Alps was kind of like shrug, we don't have anything / that's some complicated stuff. So what they did was they found a company, Boreas, which I just mentioned, and so Boreas design stuff. They don't make things. They're a fabless company. So they just design the cool things, but they can't make them. Cirque can make the things. And these two companies are coming together, and they're going to, they announced a partnership this week. They're going to be following up with me in a couple of weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks, with an actual product. They're going to actually send me a prototype too. And they already have partners lined up. That means HP, Dell, Lenovo, I don't know which ones, but some major PC manufacturers are already on board, and we'll see these come to devices sometime in 2022. I should also mention Sensel, who I did reporting on a couple weeks ago as well, will also have some announcements coming out with partners and all those kind of stuff. So these two companies are going at it, right? There are different ways of doing haptic trackpad. So in this article I posted, I explained the differences. And real quickly, you have a capacitive trackpad. This is what we all have in our laptops right now. It works like a capacitive display. There's a layer there that detects differences in charge. Your body acts as a battery, basically, and when you touch something, there's an electric current. The trackpad detects the differences, and then that gets translated. The problem with capacitive trackpads are many. One, they break, right? They're moving physical parts. They can snap easily. You have dead zones and phantom zones and false touches. Their accuracy is poor. They're actually really not good. We're talking millimeters between the sensors. How they feel okay is because of software, and that's where Microsoft's precision drivers came into play. That's why they were such a big deal. Microsoft spent a lot of time figuring out how to make capacitive trackpads feel smooth, and that's what we have. It's also why Apple trackpads feel so good. They spent a lot of time honing in the software to make them feel really nice. But even Apple's haptic trackpad is really nothing special. It is still a capacitive trackpad. They just replaced the physical click with two solenoids below the trackpad, basically coils, that can vibrate. And they worked a lot on the haptics, and Apple's very good at haptics. If you have an Apple Watch, you know what I'm talking about. So it vibrates instead of clicking. And that's all the Apple trackpad is. That's why it's been out for years, but it's not magic. What Sensel's done is with their technology is really kind of crazy. Alien. Their technology is so bizarre. They don't know how it works. It's at the particle level that when you squish the trackpad down, the particles come closer together, and then they can detect force detection that way. It actually has to do with quantum tunneling, some people think, but they don't understand how it's all working, which is pretty bizarre. This announcement this week is different. Boreas and Cirque do something different. It's called Piezo Sensors, and piezos are really interesting. They look like flat coils almost. They've been around for many years too. What's neat about them, you run a charge through them, and they can do things like detect pressure and act as a sensor, but they can also vibrate and create haptics all in one circuit, basically. And that's the value. So whereas the essential trackpad could be as thin as 3 millimeters, a capacitive trackpad is 4 millimeters or higher. These can get as thin as 1.8 millimeters. And that's a big deal because when you're designing a laptop, that space gives you two options. You can either make the laptop much thinner now, or you can add in more battery, either or, right? But this is what drives innovation in laptops. And this is why the laptop makers want this technology. There's that aspect. The other cool thing with haptic trackpads is you can customize how they feel. So when you press and they make a click, right? But they don't actually click. How loud that click is, how much the vibration is, how smooth it is, all of that can be configured. And you can't do that on current trackpads now. You can only do current trackpads with how sensitive they are, but when you click them, they all have that same click. And that varies from laptop to laptop. But that means on whatever laptop you can get, you could then move the slider to the right position, and they're all going to feel the same to you. And you can really dial in the way they feel. The other cool thing is they detect force. That is something current trackpads don't do. They click on, off, 1, 0. That's it. That's all you're getting with them. These new trackpads can detect. It's sort of like if you have a hi-fi stereo and you turn the volume knob, you get a really good stereo. You know what that feels like. It's gorgeous, like this nice, smooth. That's what these trackpads can do. So when you press on them, they can detect how much pressure you are. That can be translated into all sorts of things. Scrolling. So as you start to press, the web page can start to scroll. The harder you press, it'll increase the speed. And we're talking such minute detail in terms of the sensitivity of this stuff. You can do things like if you have a 3D image, how hard you press, 1 or 2 fingers, 4 fingers. You can then control how fast the thing spins around. You can control volume. All this stuff can be done with these trackpads. It's literally a new dimension and modality that is not currently built into laptops that will be available. What companies do with it is going to be really interesting. But there's a lot that can be done there. I do have an editorial coming out on Monday that talks about this, which is basically Microsoft needs to get ahead of this. The companies I've been talking to saying they're doing this on their own. OEMs are on board with it. I imagine what you'll see is a company like HP or Dell will release a laptop with this. They'll come out with custom software to help take advantage of some of this, but fundamentally, Microsoft needs to get on board with this with Windows 11, build this stuff into the operating system so that when you do long presses and how hard you press. The force sensitive stuff can actually control functionality in the operating system. You also need companies like Adobe and, different 3D CAD apps to get on board with this stuff too. But I really want to see Microsoft get on board. And so far I'm hearing they're not. And maybe they're waiting for the market to shake out a little bit, but they, like with the precision drivers, they need to get ahead of this before we have 10 different ways of doing things. And you're starting, if you had a Lenovo laptop back in 2015 and you had a Synaptics window that would pop up to allow you to configure the touchpad.
Yeah, terrible.
It was terrible, right? You're running software on top of the OS that was janky and it interfered with things. Microsoft got rid of all that and did precision. And now with Windows 11, you can actually do custom gestures in Windows 11, which is awesome. So I really need to see them do something here with the haptic stuff. These companies want to see Microsoft do something, because it's one thing to say, all right, these are way more accurate trackpads. You can now do IPX ratings with them because they don't have ingresses, so they don't let water on into them. They don't break as much. You're not going to get phantom zones. That's cool, but they don't get really cool until you can do stuff with that new dimension that's being used. And that's going to be relying upon Microsoft and its partners to do something there. So
yeah, I would love to see Surfaces adopt this sort of stuff. Because Apple understands this. Apple has been doing haptics for a long time.
Yep.
Now, I don't really think they've taken advantage of that new depth, as you mentioned, outside. Oh, wait, I guess they technically did with 3D Touch on the iPhone, but that went away.
Because their trackpad is still capacitive. It technically can't do what these trackpads.
Right, you're right. You're totally right. Yeah. So yeah, like it, but still, Apple understands haptics in regards to feel and how things feel, and no one else has really done that yet. I would love to see, as I guess other Android makers are sort of catching on with in regards to phones, but in the PC space, not happening. And I would love to see.
Weird thing, Huawei MateBook Pro, the new one. And I actually sent it to Kale to finish the review because I don't have time. Actually does have a haptic trackpad. I don't know who makes it, but it does do this. But I don't think it does this stuff that I'm talking about. I think it's basically what Apple's does.
It does. It also sounds very expensive. Maybe that's one of the reasons why this won't catch on, because
so Senso's version is supposed to be more expensive, but they're telling me now they've switched some things up. They're going to be giving me some info in a couple of weeks with an announcement they're going to be doing. I don't think they're that much more expensive, but you're right. There's going to be some negotiation there in terms of but we saw that too in the PC industry. Everybody was using really janky, tiny, crappy trackpads. Usually ELAN ones, until the industry started forcing, Microsoft started forcing companies to adopt precision, and then we went to the higher grade Synaptics ones with the glass layer. That's what makes a good trackpad good, is it has glass. There's a lot of potential here. This stuff is happening though. Like I said, these guys announced 2022. We will see laptops, like major laptops. In their version, they said they can make giant click pads and all this kind of stuff. You're going to see it basically in the higher end devices, but they can make big trackpads. I don't know. This is neat stuff. Like I said, I know it's weird. It sounds boring, but I'm telling you, we're going to see like this new modality to control and interact with your PC come to Windows, and how it works and everything. That's going to be interesting. But we're getting ahead of it, right? I want to get this out there now so that Microsoft can start doing this, because it's only going to be as cool as what you can do with it in Windows 11.
Yeah.
So. Anywho, more on that as that story develops. Cool stuff. Real quickly, some reviews. I did review the Toughbook 55. I know it's known for this audience. I think it's just cool if you want to go check out. It's a semi-rugged laptop. If you work outside, there are a lot of science students who work in the field, environmental students and everything like that. This is a really cool laptop. It's, it can withstand it's not fully ruggedized, so it won't survive a rainstorm, all that kind of stuff, but it can get wet. It's just a cool laptop. They've updated it this year, so it's called the MK2 Mark II. The reason is it went from 8th gen to 11th gen. They upgraded the SSDs. It now has Thunderbolt 4. Really interesting about that. This is some juicy info. So Microsoft, if you remember, they said there was a report that they don't do Thunderbolt 4 for security reasons. And people are like, oh yeah, you can technically hack in, it's technically vulnerable, and there's governments don't want it, all this. I asked Panasonic, I'm like, what's the deal with Thunderbolt? Because these computers are used by the CIA, they're used by the US military. Like, they're literally, like, if you ever watched a movie Like, these are laptops that they use. So if anyone's going to know about this Thunderbolt 4, 3 security thing, it's going to be these guys. And I asked, they're like, what? No. They're like, we've never heard of any of our customers, government, military, request no Thunderbolt. They've wanted Thunderbolt, but they're like, we make this laptop without cameras. That's requested. And we make this laptop without Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and wireless because that's requested for security. They said, we've never been asked not to do Thunderbolt 4 because of security. So I'm calling nonsense on this. I think this is still Microsoft. Their issue is Surface Connect. They invented basically a Thunderbolt 3 port that uses a different form factor, and now they've run out of bandwidth with the current chipsets. Maybe I haven't been following with the Intel stuff. Maybe the next version will have more lanes so they can allocate one to Thunderbolt and one to Surface Connect. But I think that's the issue. And they're sticking with Surface Connect, which to their credit, I think is a very popular port. They tell me over and over again, people love it. I believe them.
I love it.
Yeah. But I think it's one reason why if we don't get Thunderbolt 4 this year, I'm not certain, pin this conversation. I'm telling you, it's because of their design, not because of security. Microsoft does not sell enough laptops to the government to make this an issue. That's complete nonsense, just nonsense. Anywho, the Toughbook 55, go check out my review. I did a lot of cool photos. I did take it up onto a mountain 4,000 feet up because it has LTE. I love using this thing. It has a handle built in. It's wild. But yeah, so this is used by police, fire, EMT, U.S. military, CIA, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool if you're interested in that sort of world of computers. Again, places where you'll never find a Mac. I don't care how good your M1 processor is. It'll never be this laptop, which I think is awesome. Cale Hunt also reviewed the XPG Xena 14. That's XPG Xena with an X, Xenia. The reason I spell that out is they're kind of a new company. They're, I believe, based out of Taiwan. They're kind of like an OEM, right? They take sort of off-the-shelf parts. They don't do the custom chassis like you see with Dell, Lenovo, and HP. It's more of a generic type chassis, but these are still impressive laptops. Starts around $1,100. PCIe 4.0, full HD display, but I believe it has a high refresh rate. I forgot. It's lighter than the LG Gram, which is hilarious. They actually beat LG at the whole light thing. So this is actually lighter than a Gram laptop, a 14-inch laptop, which is insane. But Cale reviewed it. He thought it was absolutely awesome. So go check out that review for it. Like I said, $1,100. You can order it through Amazon, so you can have it for the weekend if you wanted to. But looks really, really nice. And I think that about does it for the podcast. Unless you had anything else you want.
Nope, that's that. And I have no thing of the week either. So.
I guess my thing of the week, I did see Suicide Squad on HBO Max, and I'm, go watch it is all I can say. I'm trying to think here. The director's name, now I'm drawing a blank. Oh, James Gunn. James Gunn is actually one of my favorite directors. He did Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. He's also done Brightburn. I think he wrote and produced that. But he's just an awesome director. But it's I'm not a fan of DC Comics, but when it's done right, it's done right. The first Wonder Woman was super good. This movie is done right. It is it's hilarious. It's sad. He has a real knack for focusing on the misfits and, the losers kind of in society and people, and those people, but showing their side. And it's very much like a punk aesthetic, I would say. And he does such a good job with doing that. But he's the only director I could know that can take wild, characters and actually make it watchable. Same when I first watched the trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy, like, ugh, this doesn't really, how could this possibly be good? And he can do it. And he's just so good at that stuff. So it's free on HBO Max if you have that. You can go see it in cinemas, of course, if you want to, take the risk. I know it's still out there. But I know Zach wants to see, I guess, Free Guy that opens today too, which I'm very excited about. That's 86% Rotten Tomatoes, so that's getting good reviews. So maybe we'll be back next week and we can share our thoughts on that, because I'll probably go to the cinemas to see that one.
Yeah, me too.
But other than that, I don't think I have anything else. I guess here's 2 vacations, because technically mine's about to start. Yay.
Yeah.
Other than that, I guess we'll just do some Q&A with the audience now. So for the live broadcast, you guys can start to ask questions about things we did or did not talk about during the podcast, and we'll try to answer those. If you're listening to this recorded, of course, you don't get to hear that, but you can join us Fridays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel at Windows Central, and you can also go watch the old broadcast there with the video and all that kind of jazz. As always, follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, RUBINO, and follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. You can hit us up with questions, your thoughts, and opinions there as well. And as always, we look forward to seeing you next time. We may or may not be back next week. Actually, the podcast will probably go on next week. Whether I'm here or not is the big question. So if you're interested in that mystery, tune in next week at Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Other than that, we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Wicked. Yes, I stopped at 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 00 seconds.
Oh, I almost have 1 hour, 13:59. That's so annoying.
We got to do it all over again.
Yeah. What do you think of Start 11? Oh, that should have been my thing of the week. Oh, well. Start 11, interesting. I've never really been a fan of these sort of third-party apps that try to bring back old features of Windows. I love change. I love new things. If it's something new that's native to the OS, I want to use that. So I'm not a huge fan. But I like that Start 11 looks good. If you are somebody who is a fan of Windows 7 Start menu, Start 11 will bring that back, and you can even customize it to make it look more native to Windows 11 and stuff. Super cool idea, but again, it's certainly not for me. I'm all for embracing the new rather than trying to keep hold of the old.
Yeah, that's my thoughts too. Not for me. I'm glad it's out there. I know people want to play around with that stuff. It's the beauty of Windows. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. So I'm glad that's out there. I did drop the link for Ryan Reynolds, too muscular for the Deadpool suit. Free guy promo, which I think is hilarious. Ryan Reynolds is just a hilarious mofo. Daniel, the comics are different from the movies. The comics are awesome as they ever were. Yeah, I'm sure they are. I never really I read some comics when I was a kid, mostly G.I. Joe and some other stuff, but I don't read the comics. I go into these movies cold. I don't know the characters. There's something about DC. I know the comics are good. I don't like Superman. I don't like Batman. I think when you make Superman, he's a god. He can do whatever he wants. I know there are baddies out there and all that challenge him, but it's not that interesting. Where for some reason Marvel has their characters have a little bit more. I don't know. It's just something about the characters. I saw one actor describe it as DC has better villains, Marvel has better heroes. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
Will Microsoft use a raffle system for the full surfaces if need be? How will they handle the shortages? I do not expect them to use a raffle system. What will happen is there will be limited stock, and as a result, the device is only available in a limited amount of markets. US will be one, and then there'll be a handful of others, and those markets will get very small stock. And if it'll be first come, first serve. You buy it, and if you're late, if you don't get there in time, they're sold out. You have to wait until the next batch comes in. That's just how it's going to be. That's how it was with the Laptop 4, how it has been with the Pro 7 Plus, all of which, in the UK, I keep mentioning the UK store because that's the store I go to, Microsoft Store UK. Bunch of Surface laptops have been out of stock for a while. Some of them come back now. Surface Pro 7 Plus, all of them are out of stock except for the 4G models, which is funny. But yeah, it's just how it is, and you just have to wait for them to come back into stock.
Yeah, how they control that is they limit the markets it's available in and limit to the markets where they know they can relatively ship without too much delay. Mm-hmm. Do you think the new Surface Laptop Pro Studio will have an option for discrete graphics? Good question. Probably. Or maybe. I don't know. They could, right? It's really easy not to put in a GPU. So I suppose they could do that. And you could make the argument I was going to say, they wouldn't use Intel Xe graphics. They would probably use Intel Xe Max graphics. And Max graphics it's like an MX 450 right now. So it's not nothing. You can do something with it. But I could see that possibly to keep that price point down.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They usually do it so that they can have a lower level price of entry. The Surface Book does it. The Surface Book entry level is $1,600 MSRP. But that comes without dedicated graphics, so don't buy it.
And for my needs, what I use these things for, if you threw in Iris Xe Max graphics,
True.
I'd actually be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool to game on these things. Don't get me wrong, but I know my appetite is bigger than what my actual what I'm actually going to do with these things.
But again, you know what? But for most people, for people like you, most not tech, but like people who have your workflow, the recommendation for you is to buy a Surface laptop because that's the device for you. That's why that exists.
Yeah, but I want that form factor because that form factor is cool. If I'm on an airplane, I want to bring that screen forward to watch my movie, and the laptop can't do that. Or if I just want to take notes with my pen, I don't need an RTX 3070 for that, and I don't need to spend $2,000 if I don't need to. So I can see it going both ways, because if you think about this device is a cross between what would be a Surface Pro and a Surface laptop. I don't know. It's a great question. I would hope they would, and there's definitely no reason why they can't. So yeah, we'll see.
Does the Duo 2 have a new screen size aspect ratio? The display sizes are, I believe they're slightly bigger. They are slightly narrower and slightly taller. So I think the aspect ratio is the same because of that. It's taller and narrower. But the resolution is slightly bigger as a result. And I do believe the displays are, as a result, also slightly bigger. They're not by much. The top and bottom bezels are still there. They're just a bit thinner to accommodate the taller displays ever so slightly.
Zach, regarding a lower cost Duo 2, don't you think it has a chance to the plan for launch, a Surface Duo 2 in a Pro version? I think he's asking what you think the chances are of them doing either the Pro version or the light version of Duo 2. I think it's a pretty good chance.
I think it's a good chance. Not this year, though. I think this will be Duo 2 only. And if they do a budget Duo or a cheaper Duo, that will be next year.
Did you notice that the widgets area became much wider in the new build?
Not for me. I just checked.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I'm on an ultra-wide display. I haven't noticed. We're still expecting... They didn't make that adjustable yet. That's still be able to...
Not here for me either.
Yeah, so... Widgets are still cool, but could be way cooler. Looking for that. Dan, have you reviewed Alienware X17? Great question, because I have it here. No. I want to, and you're making me feel guilty. I go to bed every night remembering all the laptops I need to review, and it makes me sad. It's sort of like when you forget to call someone on their birthday. I really do want to review that. It's a cool laptop, but I can't tell you when. My plans are, well, I have a vacation this week, but my immediate plans are I got to finish the Galaxy Book Go review as well as the HP Aero 13 review. So I'm looking at really budget stuff here. That Aero 13, the Pavilion Aero 13 from HP is amazing. It's a really cool. It's an AMD device. So take that, all you people who think I hate AMD. I'm fine with AMD. I'm going to give this a very good rating. So relax. Congratulations, Zach, on your 30,000 followers. Yes, he is now officially a celebrity in the UK.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Which is why he has glasses on.
Yeah. I just saw a headline. Twitter has paused verification applications once again.
Something that Zach will never apparently ever get.
I know.
What about the Xbox fridge review? Fortunately, that's out of my wheelhouse. I don't know who has that fridge. Oh, that was, what's his name? Miles. Did Miles review that?
I don't know.
We'll find out.
Do you expect the Duo to have a flagship camera image quality? If not the camera, but maybe unnecessary sacrifice to its design. It will certainly be a better camera. I do not think it will be, competing with the Pixel or the iPhone. The Pixel 6, that is. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if they can get it up there with the likes of OnePlus and Samsung. But like I said, we'll have to wait and see because we can't possibly know for sure until we have it in our hands and test it.
If TCL can do this quad camera array in this $500 phone, which I'm more than happy with, if I can get that image quality on a Surface Duo 2, I'll be totally fine with it. I think they can. I think it's going to be a big improvement. But we need to, as Jack just said, put into context. It's not going to beat iPhone. It won't beat Samsung. It won't beat Pixel. But I think for most people, it's going to be a pretty good camera.
Yeah, I think it will trade punches, for sure.
Yeah.
Unlike the Duo 1, which just might as well not even show up.
Right. Any rumors on Surface Studio standalone display? Womp,
No.
womp, womp. Nope. Doesn't mean it can't happen. You know, there is,
and you'd think with this whole pandemic and working from home that a monitor would be a great thing to sell, but
you think it'd also be a little bit easier for them to do.
it's unbelievable.
It's like we can do all the complexity of Surface Studio without the computer part.
We could.
It's like,
no.
But who knows? You know, one thing I'll keep iterating is that on, you know, Microsoft Surface events, the fun of them is we go into them knowing some things and spoiling some stuff.
Yep.
But more often than not, we are left with surprises. They do get on stage, sometimes do some, oh, didn't see that, didn't hear no rumors. So I expect that to be the case here. Like I said, even with Surface Pro 8, not a lot to go on. Yeah. We've heard some things. It's coming, but and I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I want to be surprised generally, you know, so.
Someone was asking if they think we think that Microsoft would do a regular single screen phone. I don't think so. I don't think there's any reason to. Single screen phones are boring, and Microsoft's ecosystem alone isn't enough to sell that.
Yep.
They need the only way Microsoft can sell a phone is if it's unique.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't know what you can do in the slab phone design area that would be truly unique. Exactly. Just make it wide. Literally rip the Duo.
It would seriously. If you just had the Duo without the other display but kept the same thinness, it would be a unique device on its own. But it would also have 1 hour of battery life.
Yeah, I do wonder what that would be like, because you have to factor you're not powering the other display.
Yeah, that's true. But so the reason why it wouldn't work is because this side of the device is all battery basically, whereas this side is the one that has the processor which means the battery in this side is tiny. I think it's only a few hundred milliamps.
Right.
So you're gonna have.
And they did that to balance it perfectly. If you remember, the Duo, each side is like perfectly balanced. It's absolutely insane what they did. I'll still defend everything they've done with the Duo in terms of design, that people don't appreciate how hard it was to make that happen.
Yeah. And the Duo 2 will be lopsided because it's got a massive bump. I actually don't know what the Duo 2 will be. I did hear the Duo 2 was slightly heavier, but I don't know. I don't have numbers for you, so take that how you will. Will the October event be live with a press audience? Who knows at this point? It could go either way. There's this Delta variant and all sorts of things going on, so hopes aren't too high, but who knows?
I'll just say Microsoft is exploring in-person events. I've told them I'm totally fine in doing an in-person event in New York. I have no qualms.
What they could end up doing is just in-person briefings individually under embargo.
Right. I will say these kind of conversations with them were before this Delta thing. The Delta thing really kind of snuck up on people in terms of how bad it and how quickly. I mean, a lot of people saw it coming, but it's changing plans. So I think Microsoft might have been planning a small event in person. That is probably up in the air at this point now, because it's going to be really hard to predict what things are going to be in another month or two. Could be better. I mean, don't forget with the Delta stuff, like they said in the UK, it went up really quickly, but also dropped down really quickly. And some have been expecting that to happen here in the US, and that could happen. In which case that could change things, but yeah, I don't know. Any news you can share about your cats? Zach, you have 2 cats now, right?
Yeah, but there's no news. They're alive. They exist.
Zoe, she just got up to go get food. I have 1 cat left. She's 18 or 19, but she's still kicking. It's funny, I was reading things online when people talk about their cats and arthritis. They're like, my cat is 13 and needs this medicine helped. And like, my cat's like 19. Like, she's like walking around. She jumps on stuff. Like, she's getting old though. I feel really bad. I'm like, I want to pause her. She's so cute as an old lady, and I just want to pause her because she's just like adorable. All she wants to do is cuddle and pets all day. Yeah. But I know it's just going to slowly get like worse and worse. I'm like, no.
So how long has the Duo 2 been in development at this point? At least 2 years, right? Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't know when exactly it started development, but I first heard about the Surface Duo in development, I think, I want to say December 2020, I think. I just want to heard...
No, you tweeted in summer 2020, because I had to defend you in some comments before. Summer 2020, you tweeted out that you already heard that version was in development. And then you announced its codename was Zeta a little while soon thereafter.
I think I definitely knew about the codename in December 2020, but I would likely have heard bits and pieces about it before. From the beginning, I heard slightly bigger displays, camera sensors on the back. That's always been a thing for the Duo 2. And I think this goes back to, when those images leaked, people were like, this must be an early prototype stuff. You will likely never see an early prototype unless Microsoft has purposely shown it to you. What you usually see, because the design needs to be finalized first, because they need to build the components that fit into that design. They can't be building components and then build a device around the components. That would be ridiculous. So they try to finalize the design as early as possible. So when the prototypes do leak, or if images for prototypes do leak, that's usually the design that they are intended to ship. The things that do change, of course, are the materials around that. The images had frosted glass, or what looked like frosted glass. Whether that ships or not, I don't know. It could ship with glossy glass. The other thing, rounded corners. I've seen prototypes of the Duo 2 with rounded corners. However, there are also prototypes that don't have rounded corners on the displays. So whether that ships, who knows? But, stuff like that, the minor details can change. But the overall shape and size of the device usually doesn't. That's usually the first thing that's finalized. So the camera bump on the back and that sort of shape and size, that's set in stone because it has to be. They can't change that because otherwise they have to rework all the different components inside that connect to the motherboard for the camera system, and then they have to change the battery size, and it becomes unusable. So the design is usually one of the first things that are finalized, and next year's Duo is probably at that point now. So yeah.
Although I think it's safe to say that those photos that leaked out of it weren't the final prototype or the final version.
No, yeah, but
right?
I'm talking about the design of it, like the layout of things, like the camera bump and the size of the camera bump, the width of the device, stuff like that. That is set in stone. But the materials and stuff like that can change. The displays can change and whatnot. But the rest of it, more or less, is the same.
Speaking of, will the Surface Duo 2 have metal trim instead of the plastic trim in Surface Duo? I don't think it'd be metal, but
I think it's still plastic.
But they probably changed the material because the old material got dirty and changed colors.
Well, you hope so. I know. So it is a bit thicker, so maybe the thickness adds to the structural, stability of it. I know that they were aware of the USB-C ports cracking. I'm sure they've done something to reinforce that. But I still think the trim is plastic.
It has to be because where the antennas are.
Exactly. I've not seen any prototypes with antennas.
Right. Can we install Windows 11 on a virtual machines that run on a compatible minimum requirement? I have no idea. Sorry,
yeah,
I don't.
I think you can.
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to.
Should we expect Android 12 on the Duo 2? Not at launch. Duo 2 will ship with Android 11. Microsoft is, I think, just about ready to finalize that build for the Duo 2 at this point. That will happen, and that will ship with Android 11. I have been told that the frequency or the speed in which they deliver Android 12 will be much faster than Android 10 to Android 11 was. Only because, and I mentioned this before, the reason why Android 11 has taken so long is they had to rework a lot of the dual screen stuff that Microsoft itself worked on because Android 10 didn't support dual screens. Android 11 natively supports dual screen, so they've been ripping that stuff out, and it takes time to do that. But once they're on Android 11, they shouldn't have to do that again, so it will take them less time to update to Android 12. I last heard that Android 12 might roll out to the Duo 1 and Duo 2 in spring next year, but we'll have to wait and see.
Are you worried about the Duo 2 shipping with Android 11 while Android 12 will be on flagships? I'm not. I don't think this matters at all. Listen, I know Android 12 has some nice stuff, and I've seen some stuff with the they're breaking base. Someone there's a headline recently, I think it was on How to Geek, about how the new theming part in Android 12 kind of looks like an old Windows Phone, where when you apply an accent, it applies throughout the operating system. I think it's cool. I don't think Android 12 is like a must-have upgrade. I don't think any of these upgrades are really must-have upgrades. They're nice, but you're also talking our audience. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what's going on with these updates in the OS, and you want it. If you're a normal person, you're like, what's Android 12? Why is it good? I have a tough time. I literally could not tell you right now why you would want Android 12. I'm not saying there aren't reasons. I'm saying I just don't know them, because even I don't follow that stuff as closely as possible. So I don't think this matters at all. I think you're right, though, in the sense of, and Kareem is a tech writer himself. This is a nitpick that tech people will make because they have to, right? And to be fair, that's their job. You're doing a review. It's fair to point out, like, hey, other devices have Android 12. This one is Android 11. But I think that's just as nerdy as having to pick apart photos and zoom in 10 times and be like, oh my God, look at the difference. I don't think people, really care at all.
If the Surface Book 4 patent turns out to be true, do you think you'll like that new approach? Is it something you agree with? Until I see it in person, I'm not 100% sure. But I like the idea of a pull-forward display. It will be their execution of that will be the deciding factor for me. Because that patent looks very complicated. So
the best part about it is the reason 360 devices are cool. But like I said, they make sense on 13-inch devices. But not having to lift a device off your lap and flip it around and manhandle, this thing's it's got to be 4 pounds. If it's a 14-inch and a RTX and it's kind of thick, and it's got to be nearing 3.5, 4 pounds. You don't want to lift that up and like flip it around, but you could keep this thing in your lap and change every posture. You could be a laptop, you can be floating display and lay it down as an easel, all within one motion and never lifting it off your lap. That is way cooler than flipping a device around and then putting the keyboard on the exposed part, touching a hard surface, getting germs on it, getting dirt into it. Like, the 360 hinge has been okay. It was a nice start. I think this is the next gen. I really do think this is the better way to do this stuff. So I'm super thrilled if this comes to fruition.
And there's an argument to be made, and Microsoft loves making these kind of arguments, where because you don't have to pick it up and flip it around, you just simply pull forward without even thinking about it, really, that it keeps you in your flow. Microsoft loves that phrase and that idea of you don't even have to think about it. It just happens.
Yep, that's a very, very good point. That is, I would say, the number one selling factor, that kind of form factor. So I'm just, God, I really hope they do that. If they do, I know they're not going to put 4G in it. It really drives me nuts because I've did use that everywhere. And I know they're not going to do that because Microsoft. But man, that'd be so killer if they were to do something like that. Oh, well.
Is there hope for
Android 12 is like...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Android 12 is like Windows 11. It has very good visual redesign and people like it. Sure. I mean, it's great. I don't think people hate Android 11. I don't think people look at Android 11 like my phone is so ugly and they hate turning it on. I mean, again, go up to an average person on the street buying a phone and be like, are you sad your phone doesn't have Android 12? And they'll probably look at you like some kind of lunatic. I get it. You guys know this stuff. And we are that core 0.01% of tech audiences. I'm telling you, average people don't know. When they get an update, they'll be like, oh, cool, my phone looks nicer, But other than that, they're not searching out this info, and they're not staying up at night crying into their pillows thinking, when am I getting Android 12? It's just not a thing.
I don't even know what Android 12 has in it.
That's what I just said. That's what I said. I literally can't tell you why Android 12 is better.
Yeah.
And I think there are reasons. I just don't know them because I don't care. When it gets here, it gets here. And then I'll be interested in Android 12.
And also, the Duo 2 will get Android 12, so it's not like it will be without forever. It will get Android 12 and it will get Android 13. And probably Android 14. I think they've committed to 3 years of OS updates. So
MS Launcher needs to be customizable in Duo 2. Yeah, 100%. We had a conversation with this on Twitter recently, Zach and I, and it was because there's been no movement on the launcher for months and months, including just on Android devices. Our hunch is, and what they hinted at is they're working on stuff. I think with Android 11 coming out in the fall across many more devices, I think they're going to have a new version of launcher with a heavier redesign, more functionality. I think that'll come to Duo and Duo 2 as well. That's my guess. I think Zach is on board with that too.
Yep, I agree.
That's what Android Essentials for. 100%. Those nerds can cover it. I'll go. They right.
Yeah, us cool kids on Windows PCs don't have to worry.
Right.
Right. A few more questions. I think it's time to head off. So get them in. Last call. Last orders.
Many of my friends don't even know what version of Windows their computer. Yeah, I mean, dude, my best friends who have kids, they couldn't even tell me what model phone they have, let alone what version of Android they're running. They just don't know. Their phone is to make calls, call their wife, call their kids, get an email for work or something like that. That's it. People don't care about this stuff. I'm telling you.
What about a thinner Surface Go with slimmer bezels and ARM? You got to remember, The Surface Go is supposed to be a budget device. I think the bezels are slim enough on the Surface Go 2 that I don't think they'll be slimmed out anymore. The thinness is not a problem. I think the Go is a perfectly slim device as is. Regarding ARM, I think it could happen. I don't know for sure. Obviously that's just a guess. I haven't heard anything specific. I think an entry level 7C would be good, and then the Intel M3 could be for the higher tier models of the Go series. But remember, the Go is a budget Surface. It's not supposed to be this cutting edge to edge display, top of the end device. It's really not. So I don't expect them to go all out with any sort of Surface Go design. That's what the Pro X is for. Did I hear Surface Go 3 in October? It's a possibility. I've heard whispers that a Go 3 could be around the corner. But again, the chip shortage could totally change that. So don't hold your breath, but it's certainly a possibility.
Thanks for the fun podcast, guys. Happy vacay, Dan. Thank you, Javin. Appreciate it. Do you think when my voice is going, do you think Windows on ARM matters with Intel Alder Lake coming this fall? It's a great question. As much as I love Qualcomm and I love Snapdragon and all that kind of stuff, I've been saying for a while that Intel stuff is getting so good in this space. The differences between them are becoming less and less. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Pro X is still super thin and it's super fanless and it's super cool, temperature wise, that it's still something that Intel struggles with. My ThinkPad X1 Titanium, which I always love bragging about, still has a fan in it, and a fan comes on and it's like, ugh, there it is. And I don't have that problem when I use an Elite Folio. I do think though, Intel is closing that gap / Qualcomm is not innovating fast enough. And you're starting to see that kind of happen. But Qualcomm did buy Nuvia. Nuvia are ex-Apple engineers. Those are the engineers that designed Apple's famed silicon, including the M1 chip. So they now work for Qualcomm. That means in 2 years, we'll see the results of that. So I think Qualcomm is on a good footing here. But I have to admit that the Qualcomm stuff is still, to me, at least a generation behind before it gets really good. And that's kind of my mini review of the Samsung Galaxy Book Go. Really cool design, awesome price point. The performance, it's okay, but give me another generation, and I think that device will be there.
Not a question, but a story. Broke my Surface Duo, got replaced by MS, and was sent a brand new device, 256 gigs, which is up from 128. Must be running low stock. In fact, I have the same story, but this was quite a while ago. When the USB-C port on mine chipped, some people were saying that if you can get to the right support agent, they will replace it under warranty. And I did that, and I had a 128, and they sent me a 256 as well. So I maybe you're right. Maybe they just had a bunch of 256s built specifically for refurbs. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. There's the older dial app that can be run through Run. Why Microsoft doesn't update the app that can run telephony capabilities into Windows 11? Zach, you actually kind of know about this, right? I mean, they ripped out all the telephony capabilities of Windows 11, right?
Yeah, it's because there's no phones running Windows 11. If there is, it's because somebody hacked it onto a phone and it's not officially supported. There's no reason for them to update it. That's why.
But I mean, they can't just add in phone support to Windows 11, right?
I mean, they could if they wanted to add telephony,
but it's not simple.
Obviously they will have to work on drivers and whatnot, and support modern modems and whatnot. But there's no point.
Yeah. When will Android app support drop? We don't know. Coming weeks. Why do you think the new Surface Studio is so delayed? It's a good question.
I have no idea.
I think they don't sell that much. Yeah. So the demands, there's definitely interest, but interest and demand are two separate things, right? I think the amount of people actually buying these things, it's not that high. It's sort of like why Nikon might take 3 or 4 years before it updates its flagship DSLR. They could release smaller versions, right? But it's such an expensive device that they don't need to. And they would rather do a substantial redesign or substantial upgrade instead of an iterative one. There could be also things we don't know, specifically the silicon, the processors they want to use, the GPU. Maybe, my Toughbook 55 I just talked about, one of the cool things about that laptop, but I even mentioned, it's a modular PC. It has all these bays that pop in and out of it. One of the things you can put into is a GPU. You can actually add an AMD Radeon GPU to it. The old one doesn't work on the new version now because almost the Intel graphics are almost faster than it. They are coming out, though, with a new AMD Radeon GPU expansion pack, but it won't be out till spring 2022. Why didn't they launch it now? Well, I assume they're waiting on AMD to vent the GPU and to be able to ship it. And so that stuff affects design, So Panasonic could have been like, well, we'll release a toughbook in the spring, but instead they released it now and said, we'll sell the GPU later because it's just an add-on anyway. But for studio, you can't do that. So there could be supply issues. Maybe there's a component that they really want to make the device. It's just can't be mass produced, or it's not slated. Maybe it's a next gen part. We don't know these things, But I think all of these reasons I just gave play a part into why there is no Studio 3 yet.
So just clarifying regarding the dialer on Windows 11, the person was referring to the fact that some services have support for SIM cards. Why can't these SIM cards, use the calling app to make phone calls? PCs with SIM card slots is usually for LTE data. It's not for a phone line. So right. The dial is unnecessary because you can't make phone calls with them anyway. Because the service you're getting usually when you subscribe is just for data on a Surface device. It's not for phone calls. And I don't think Windows has ever supported that desktop anyway. Even when Windows Phone was a thing and the dialer was fully supported, I don't think PCs with LTE were able to make phone calls. So I don't see why that would change.
Yeah, it's a whole other software stack and drivers and stuff like that than just giving data. Zach is right on that. So you can't just add a dialer and be like, now it's a phone. It's a lot more.
Okay, that's probably enough, I think.
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, we may be back next week. We may not. Who knows? Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.